Welcome everyone. Today we are doing something very different, so I hope your coffee is warm because today we will talk about how to choose, how to build and how to play with decks and have them stay fun to you. Well, today we're talking about building the deck only a little bit. We shall begin with it because of course it is the start of your journey of having a deck. But I think the most important part of having a deck that is fun to you is not really in building the deck, but more so in playing with it and how you upgrade the deck, because you shouldn't be spending too long just building decks, because of course that can be fun, but it is even more fun to play with them. Alright, I think my first tip is that you could also ask me for deck building, because I have been very bad actually at doing what I find fun in my life. So I made it into a science, at least for Magic, because even in Magic at first I didn't really know what I found fun. I had a Breya deck once. I started with Commander, which really wasn't fun at all to me because it was a starter deck that really revolved more around artifacts on the one side, but eventually the deck evolved into being a control deck, which I really, for one, wasn't really good at that moment. But for two, I really didn't like doing things that weren't fun to other people. And in my playgroup, people really didn't like being too controlling. It was more like swinging and being aggressive in your deck. So that made the deck not fun to me. So I made it into a science to find out what is fun to me, what is fun for my opponents, but mostly what is fun to me. So if you want, I could help you find out which decks will be fun for you. And if you have any questions about my journey in it, well, just ask me. Throughout the video, I think I will go back to things that were fun to me and what I learned, because I have been playing for 10 years now. And I've learned a lot about things that don't work. So let me know in the comments what kind of things you're looking for in a deck, and I could help you find the perfect commander for you. And also by asking me, you help the channel grow. So it's a win-win really. So I really want to help you find that deck. But in general, choosing your deck is all about having, I think, as little choice as you possibly can, because in Commander there are so many commanders to choose from. If you don't pick a little bit of the question out at a time, it will be really hard. So I would say start either with picking a color. I do have a video for this already showing you all of the colors in a large extent, so that you can find the one that fits you. But even that video is already more than an hour long, so it is already a really big choice. That's why I'm saying sift through the choices you have to make and make one at first and then the other. So if you have a color, of course, then you can pick a commander or a theme from the commanders in that color, for example. You don't have to start with colors. You could also choose to start with picking a commander that you just like. So if you have a commander and you think the ability is cool or the flavor is cool, from a new set perhaps, or a set you really, or like a Spider-Man card that you really like, you could start with that commander and build from there. Now I know I just said Spider-Man card and many people will be angry. Well, sue me. If people like things, they should like things, and that is how you should think as well. Third option to go is you could choose a theme, like going white with a really big army of creatures, or having an engine type deck like Aristocrats, where you sacrifice your creature and you do a small thing, you get more cards, and then you do another small thing and they all synergize really well with each other. Or you could choose to go with an Enchantress deck, for example, if you like nature and going big on your really big creatures. That could be fun too. But it is also, in theme at least, a choice of mechanic. So do you like to be aggressive? Do you like to be more of an engine deck? Do you like to be the one that plays a really big creature or that controls the battlefield? if I don't like something, you could still like it. And you have to choose for the theme or the vibe that you want to go with. So you also need to think about, well, aristocrats, that is all about sacrificing creatures, and I don't want to be sacrificing creatures. I want to be kind to my creatures. Well, then perhaps if you like engine decks, perhaps a token deck is more of something for you, because that is often also about cards working well together to create a bunch of small cute creatures, for example. Maybe that is more your vibe and you should go with that. Or maybe small cute creatures aren't your vibe and you should go with aristocrats. So that's just one example. So it can be daunting to choose, but try to make it a smaller choice. Perhaps you start out with making a small list of things that you like. So for example, you want to, for example, the previous example, if you want to have an army of small cute creatures, you can write that down. If you want to play, you found enchantments to be very fun, then perhaps you should go with an enchantress deck, because those often also have small cute creatures, and that could also point you towards the commander that you should be choosing. Perhaps you want one with cute creatures in the art or something like that. So you can start small to make it easier to choose your deck, but I think you should start with finding what you find to be fun. And how you should go through this is just go through all the themes or go through all the commanders or watch my color video and feel something like excitement for one of them, and that will be a very nice start to start deck building. The most important thing after that to think about is the balance between challenge and skill. So what do I mean with this? Well, challenge, you need enough of a challenge in a deck so that you can express your skill level through the choices you make. So you want to be sure to have perhaps enough modal cards if you are already a very skilled player. Or perhaps control is a good example, because then you have millions of choices to make. Do I counter this? Do I not counter this? Every turn cycle, for example. But also be sure that it isn't too much of a challenge. Make sure that your skill level is high enough so that you can keep track of all of the triggers that you need to think of. Or that you need to think about all of the combos that you could be making. Make sure that you, if you have a very hard deck because you thought it was fun, make sure that you practice a bunch with it and try to learn what the combos are in your deck, what your deck tries to do, and just play around with the deck. So, for example, when I started out with Commander, because there are so many cards in a deck, I usually, while I was watching some series, I was just flipping through my cards, seeing what they are and what they do again, and sort of reminding me and making a mental image of what they do. This can be a fun way to interact with your deck too. It doesn't always have to be just playing the game. You could also be excited, like seeing a card and being like, whoa, I really want to play with that card again. I'll try to get it into my hand or something like that. Now, if you don't feel any excitement, well, perhaps Magic isn't the game, but of course, it doesn't need to be that you see a commander and just think, wow, yeah, that's it. Perhaps you don't know which one to pick. Well, you can also think about fun. Like, there are 3 ways to have fun with Magic. You have the competitive side, so you need to think about how competitive you want to be, or your playgroup wants to be, perhaps, so that you know how good your deck needs to be. So perhaps you can watch a tier list or something, or a comparison video about multiple commanders in your theme that you like, or something like that, and see which one really fits the level of skill you need. There's also creative fun aside from competitive fun, which is more about building the deck. What I would say, if you like to be creative with your deck, make sure you choose a commander that isn't too specific. So for a commander to start out with, for example, I would also always say try to pick one that isn't really too specific, but still has a theme to hold on to. So perhaps it sacrifices creatures, but that doesn't just mean that you only can play cards from one set, for example. Because if you pick a mechanic like max speed from Aether Drift, which is probably only going to be in Aether Drift, it might be hard to find new ways to play your deck. You need to find that specific thing fun, like getting in with damage and then doing something with it, in order to have that commander. Perhaps later on it will become an evergreen keyword or something, max speed, but I don't think so. Third kind of fun is social. Perhaps you want to focus on the interactions you have with friends around the table. So in that case, if that is something that is fun to you, you could also look for example, a group hug deck if it is something where you want to just create fun experiences. Or perhaps you want to play a control deck, because then you will be interacting with players a bunch, because you will be countering their spells. Think about how you want to interact with the table, is just what I'm saying here. Those are three kinds of ways you can look at finding a commander or a deck that is fun to you. Also, another thing, maybe you don't feel excitement, but you could also look for the curiosity you are feeling while building something. So what I often feel like is a way to know whether this is a deck you want to really build is, are there ideas popping up while you are building the deck that just come out of your own mind? So of course it is a very easy way to start building a deck by looking at the internet and looking at what other people are building when they are building this commander or this theme. That is also valid, of course, so you can look for what the good cards are and know what the good cards are. But perhaps you already are feeling like, perhaps I need some more card draw in this deck, or perhaps I could make this type of combo, or perhaps this would work very well with this, or perhaps this theme is really speaking to you and you start looking for cards with rabbits in the art. So think about whether you are already thinking about new kinds of cards that could also go into the deck while you are deck building, without just seeing what needs to be done. So I make many decks, and I know I want to really build a deck and create it and buy all the cards for it when I start feeling like, okay, maybe I need more of this, or I feel like this will be fun in the deck, perhaps I should do this. So think about what makes you curious, what makes you want to brew your own deck, because then I can assure you the deck will be fun once you start playing it. Of course, net decking can still also be fun, so don't see this as, well, I'm not building it on my own, I shouldn't play this. But if you are building it on your own, if you are brewing, and if you are thinking of new things and creative ways to build the deck, or perhaps you have like a pet card in there that you really want, then it will probably be a fun deck. Next point is upgradability. So when you are building a deck, I'd say don't take too long building the deck at first. Make sure you have a workable deck, because of course you can net deck and make a perfect deck, but you probably at first won't be able to get all the cards, is my experience. So make sure that you have a deck that you can use that already goes and works with the commander, but don't try to make it perfect yet. Just make sure that it is a deck that you can upgrade later. So how do you upgrade your deck? Well, check out the new sets is the first thing I'd say. So just go on Scryfall again and look for the things that your commander wants to do. You can look for the certain colors that your commander is in. And for example, if you have a commander that works with dealing combat damage, you can just look for all the cards that have the words deals combat damage on the card, so that you can find all the cards that you can use from the new set and that fit your commander's theme, and then you can use those to upgrade your deck. That's one way, but you could also just look at the games. So if you are building a deck, make sure that you start playing with it as soon as you can. Starting to play That's good. Later, I will give you advice to not play too often, but that's something different. Try to start playing with your deck, because if you play with it, you can see what things work and what things don't work. So if you already have an established collection, I would say make sure you use a bunch of things out of your collection when you are building your new deck, because they are the cheapest cards that you can get because you already have them. But alright, you are starting a game. Now you want to look at what cards you are playing, because that means that they probably fit your deck. Also note the cards that you are playing but that aren't performing. So if you play something and it just didn't do what you expected it to do, write that down, and perhaps you should scratch that card or scratch that combination of cards. Or if you didn't play them at all, at the end of your game you will have them still in your hand, or you have discarded them. Try to write that down too, because that means that they probably weren't useful to you at that moment. You could look at them later and think about them, and perhaps you will know that they aren't right for the deck. Now also note, because you shouldn't only be negative, that isn't fun. Also note the cards that did feel fun. Try building around those cards, or actually make a new deck around it. Perhaps you have found a combination of cards that felt so fun, perhaps you want to make a deck all about that interaction. Or you could make a choice to put more of those cards into your current deck, of course. That is also fun. What I would say is try for your first decks, have decks that have some variance built in. Of course, you don't want them to be different all the time, but if you have a few different things your deck can do, that will show you a few things that you might feel are fun, so that you can choose later what kinds of deck you really want to build, or perhaps what kind of deck you want to make this deck into. Now, there is the question of variety versus consistency, because again, you don't want only variance. For example, Atla Palani was a deck I made for my girlfriend. It is a deck that is all about being random. Atla Palani Nestender says that whenever an egg you control dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card, and then you may put that onto the battlefield. So basically you are playing with a random creature card from the top of your library. Now if you have a bunch of cards in your deck that aren't fun to get out onto the library for free, then this deck wouldn't be fun at all. So you want to close in and make, of course this is very random, if you have 20 creatures in your deck aside from your commander, of course, then you will have a 1 out of 20 chance to get a new creature. Let's say it's simplified like that. So it is very random, but you can limit that randomness and make it consistent enough by only putting very good creatures that you always like to see into the deck, so that it is at least consistent enough. Now there are other things that you can do to make your deck consistent, like having enough lands. I always put in 38 lands, because that will make sure that you have more than 50% of a chance to have 3 lands, but also you have less than 30% chance to have 4 lands. So that is, I think, the perfect amount of lands to have in my opening hand. Usually I try to aim for 3, so I like doing that. You could also go with a fewer lands, but I would say it makes it less consistent, and you have fewer hands that you are very happy to see. Also think about the mana curve of your deck. This is something that many people forget when building a deck, because the most fun part is just getting the cards that you like and putting them all in there. But having a great mana curve means that you can have a few big plays until turn 4 or 3. And then you might start to double spell, which means on one turn you can play multiple spells, which can feel very fun, because then you have way more choices than you would otherwise have. Now have also enough card draw, because that means that you can keep double spelling, of course, and you will see more cards out of your deck. You also want enough pieces of interaction. Personally, I always have 15. 10 pieces of removal that target a creature, and 5 pieces of board wipes, so that you can always play the game together with your friends, because interaction, removal or counters or board wipes will make sure that you have something to do with your opponent's boards as well, and you need to watch what they are doing. So that also makes it more fun. And have enough ramp, because you want to play out your creatures and your spells, and not doing that can be not fun. So make sure that you have enough ways to get enough lands or mana out on the battlefield. Even if you are not in a green deck, then you can always still play mana rocks. And also, last but not least, focus on your themes. As a rule of thumb, you need to try to have 9 cards in every theme. A theme can be aristocrats, for example, but I would make it a little bit more specific. Within aristocrats, as an example, you need cards that sacrifice and cards that want to be sacrificed. You want to have at least 9 of each of those. If your theme is big creatures, make sure you have at least 9 big creatures in your deck, because that means that you have at least, in every game, you have probably at least 1 card from those themes in your hand, if we also count in the amount of cards you are drawing. So 9 cards is the minimum, I would say, to make it consistent enough. Now, there are also things that you can do to make your deck more fun in the variety kind of things. So this was consistency. For variety, there's something else you want to do. So variance can be the rest of your deck. You have your interaction, your lands, your ramp, your card draw, but then the rest of your deck, aside from your themes, can be pretty random. You could put in some pet cards that you really like, that whenever you see it, you get happy because you like playing it. Or you could put in some things that are random, like having high stakes. Perhaps you need to flip a coin or roll a dice. Perhaps it is something that is random on its own, like Atlapalani's mechanic, of course. You could also, and I would really advise you to do this, have a dream. A perfect combo that takes 5 cards or something like that. That isn't happening every game, but is really fun when it does. You could also have a way to perhaps win on a certain turn, because you are a bit more competitive in your playgroup. Keep in mind that this shouldn't be your main goal, because then going for that goal can be a bit of a fun stopper. You could still make it your only goal, but make sure that then it is consistent enough and that you get to that goal more often. If this is something that is a fun variance thing, you shouldn't have it be your main goal. So in this case, try forgetting those goals after you've set them, but do set them, because it can be fun to dream about the things you could do with your deck. But also think about how much variance you really want, because some people want games to be very different every time, and some people want a fine game every time and want it to be as consistent as possible. Or perhaps you are very competitive and want to win every time. Well, that's fine too. If your playgroup is fine with it, go for it and make it not variant. Don't put in any variance. Make it a very consistent deck in that case. Think about what you find fun, but variety can be fun for many people. Next point is make the deck yours. Make it something that only you can make. So, for example, many people make decks more fun by playing alternate arts, or even by having an accessory for the deck, like a deck box or a playmat that fit with your deck, something like that. Perhaps you have many custom made cards or something like that. Also, make sure that you break the game enough. Many people like playing a green deck that is all about board wipes because they like breaking the color pie. Green decks usually don't play board wipes, but perhaps that is something that you want. Or perhaps you're breaking the game because you are doing something that doesn't feel fair or something like that. Something that feels exponential in a way. Also get a story or flavor that you like. Not only for the commander, but also the feel of the 99. This can be very hard at first because, of course, I just told you, try to pick your commander first. But if you have a commander that feels nice, you also need to look at the 99 cards. Make sure that you have enough cards in there that befit the theme that you really like. For example, if you like the small guys, and the whole army of tokens, perhaps rabbits, or perhaps we're going with the mice or something like that. You want to make sure that your cards in the deck also feel like that. So maybe the cards are all feel like they are small guys that shouldn't be as strong as they start becoming. Or perhaps if you have a stompy deck, make sure that everything feels wild or something like that. Also, I know that many players love to fill their decks with a certain theme, but you don't have to build everything around that theme. You could also go with a certain vibe. Perhaps you have a deck that is all about noble creatures or chaotic creatures, or perhaps you could go with an aesthetic like the Eldraine fantasy fairy tale things, or perhaps you want to go with something that, well, perhaps you do want to go with something that feels cute all the time. So make sure you feel like the deck is yours by, for one, making it fun to you, but also you could just make something that you like to see. Perhaps you like the aesthetic, and whenever you see a card you get to be a little bit happy, or perhaps you like the flavor and you're reading that while people are going off with their own combos. I often have felt at some point like the game was a little bit boring, and then I could just look at my cards and I like them, and I was still pretty happy playing. Now this moves into the next point very well, because you do need to make sure that your deck is strong enough. Sometimes you have playgroups where you just are the worst at your playgroup at playing, and perhaps they have way better decks. So it can be nice. One thing I would advise you to do is make sure you have a deck for multiple levels of gameplay. I think the brackets are a great start for this, but they aren't the end stop for everything you need to know about multiple levels of quality of deck building. But make sure that if you are in a casual playgroup, you have a casual deck. If you are in a CEDH playgroup, make sure you can go along with that CEDH playgroup. If you have a playgroup that is all about tuned decks, they're good enough to be almost perfect, well, make sure you have a deck that is like that as well. So for starters, I would say make sure you have at least something that is starter level, because most people at least have that. But there are many people who don't like playing starter level, so after your starter level deck, make sure you have something that is of a above medium level, because that will be what most people are. So try to have multiple decks that focus on multiple levels, so that perhaps in your playgroup you can have multiple settings. You could all choose to do a precon only game after you've just done a very competitive game. And you could also, I think this is a very fun way to do it, build a deck with a certain budget. Make sure that if you have a playgroup that you play very often with, perhaps you could all build a $50 deck for each other. Or perhaps you say, let's play with our $100 decks, and everyone knows what deck they need to get to have a sort of even playing field. It can be very fun to have very matched games like that. Now this leads into a very important rule, which is rule 0. It is very important for playing with any group to have a rule 0 conversation. What this means is that you will talk with your playgroup before any game starts about how you want to play. This is true for any tabletop game, and it is also true for Magic. Make sure to talk about what everyone finds fun, especially if you often play with the same playgroup. But even if you're playing just once with this group, Tell everyone a little bit about your deck, or ask for an estimation of everyone's level, experience, deck building level, and with a steady playgroup this conversation will be ongoing. Perhaps you notice you need a little bit of graveyard hate for that one player, and that's fine. It helps evolve your games. It could even be fun to add more rules to the game. Examples are, and here are many, having the Monarch mechanic in there from the start for the player last in turn order. This promotes more aggressive games and can be an equalizer for the last person in order, because starting first is a very nice bonus to have in any game. Or you could do a pool of random rules for each game. There's also the aspect of First Blood. Perhaps you can work with points, and First Blood, meaning dealing the first point of combat damage, for example, to another player, gives you a point, while winning the game gives you 2. And then you can balance the amount of points you gain however you want. And any quests work like this. For example, casting 3 spells in a turn or having 20 cards in your graveyard. Now, this is something I almost always try to use, free mulligans to some extent. Having hands that don't work can be very demotivating and won't be fun, so in any casual group, I think you should be very free with the amount of mulligans you get. So think about how your group could do this and what is fun for your group. I often let players pick the cards they don't want and just replace them, so that you at least have some cards that you like. Also, if you don't have a hand, then normal mulligan rules apply. But you could do anything. I have seen tables where you can pick any amount of hands because they just trust you to be fair with it. And if you have a hand that is good enough, you will take it. Next one is Commander for a Day. This is a very fun one if you know your other players don't get angry. Commander for a Day means you can cast one commander from any other opponent once a game. That also means that they can't play that commander for that moment. But it could be a fun thing to have a little bit of more tomfoolery around. Also, friendly mana is also something that only fits if your playgroup is good with stuff like this. It means that each turn cycle you can give one other player 1 mana at any point in the game. So this is something you don't have to do, even if the rule is in there. But it can be nice to trade off some mana, or perhaps sometimes someone needs a little bit of extra mana to start off their game and they are a lot behind. Well, then it can be fun to give that player that mana. You could also do it forced. So at the end of your turn, you have to pick someone who will gain an extra mana at their first main phase or something like that. Yeah, any way goes. Of course, this is just about what is fun to you. There's also the point of land go. Many people think it is very annoying that you have to start playing Commander and then for the first 2 or 3 turns in casual groups, it's normal to have just a turn of playing a land and saying go. You could start out with 1 or maybe 2 basic lands on the battlefield for everyone. Perhaps you only draw 5 after that to offset this. And you should note that this can be very good for multicolored decks. So one other thing you could also do is make sure that those lands are wastes. So everyone starts with 2 colorless lands, for example, so that you do accelerate the game and change the game a lot, but you don't give any advantage to certain players, except for then the colorless players or the 1 mana players. Well, those will be very happy with those as well. But I think there should be some drawback to having multicolored decks. You could also play Plane Chase, which is an established way of playing the Commander game or any game in a different manner. This is a set of cards with effects on them, and perhaps you pick 1 to be out all game, so that you have a sort of Plane Chase deck and you alter the games in any random way. Or you could have the deck out there and have players roll a die, where at certain rolls they get to draw a new Plane Chase card, which is what Plane Chase was meant to be. And it is another fun way to change up your Commander games. 2 more ways are Commander sidekicks, where you could have a card next to your Commander that is also a sort of Commander, but we call it a sidekick. You could use an artifact, use an enchantment. You could make rules to have them only be creatures, for example. But that makes some decks really strong. So you should think about this beforehand and think about what decks will be fun with this. In any one of these rules, many decks will be stronger and many decks will be weaker because the format has changed. Last rule is infinite mode, where creatures don't die. They go into exile with 3 counters on them and they get returned after the counters are gone. This can be fun for many people, but again, it is very warping of the format. So any rules go. You can think of your own, of course. You can get some inspiration from Planechase or inspiration from anywhere for that matter. I'd love to know if you have some more rules that you play, because I think these are really interesting and I love to try them out. Next point is more about building the deck again, but it is also about playing the deck, which is testing your deck. You could do this online. You could test your deck in any way by drawing 7 cards from your deck if you put your deck list online. Or you could print the cards, which is sometimes something that people hate to see. So make sure that if you start playing with the deck, you make sure that everyone is okay with you having printed the cards. But if you print any cards, it can be fun to try out to what they call goldfishing the deck, which is trying to draw 7, for example, and just playing out a few turns. So that you know whether the deck feels fun. Of course, this is different from actually playing the game, so you should take that in mind. But if you feel like, oh, there are some interesting things I could do with this deck, well, maybe it's your deck. And this makes sure that you can go quickly from building your deck into trying out the deck, which is, I think, the most important aspect of this. Now, I think you should discard the idea if this is already not fun, because you are in the building stages and you should at least have some sense of, okay, this is something I want to do more of. You could also rebuild the deck into something new if you are starting to test. Or also you could, if you already have the cards, sell the cards and get a new deck. I would keep experimenting because this is very important. Discarding your deck if it's not fun anymore is something that you should do at any point. But rebuilding your deck can be very rewarding too. Perhaps you just need a new commander, or perhaps you just need many new cards. You could also, when you are starting to build a deck, do a minimum viable product, which means to make a deck that is just good enough. I said this before, but it's very important to start as quickly as possible with your deck and not be stuck in the building of the deck. So make sure it is good enough and take some cards from your collection plus a few new cards that you think are very fun, so that later you can upgrade the deck. But I also said before, if you have a deck, don't play it too often. You'll get bored by anything that you do too often. I'd say base the amount of games you play if you have the option to try out other decks. So if you have a few levels of decks, power level wise, make sure you try a few of them out and don't just keep playing the same one over and over. Why? Because then you will burn out from the deck. And it can be fun to have a deck that is very old, and sometimes it will be really nice to bust out that old deck and try it again. Perhaps with a new playgroup, perhaps an old deck will be better against a newer pod or new decks from your opponents, and you can try it out again, and maybe it was fun but it misses a few things. Well, then you can upgrade it and make sure it is playable again. You should also talk about your games, and what I mean is talking about the game you just had. This often happens automatically, but talking about the game just after the game often reveals what people were excited about and what they weren't excited about. If you know these things, then perhaps you learn more about what should be in your deck. Also, I think you should keep learning about your deck and about playing and how to play well. Because knowing more things about your deck is a way to keep your deck fun. Because even if your deck isn't changing, you are constantly changing. Try talking about things that could have been done better by you at the end of the game. Or ask tips from other players, without of course giving away too much. Perhaps if one of the players is out of the game, you could show them your hand and you could talk about your hand later with them. Or something I always do, look at the next few cards you would have drawn after losing or winning the game. If you look at the next 7 cards and the answer you needed to win or not lose wasn't in there, perhaps you needed more of those answers. Also, think about whether you would have preferred another kind of card. If there is like an upgrade you could do to another type of card, perhaps you needed more card draw because you didn't have any cards left in hand, you should get in more card draw. You should note the things that you are missing and then add those in deck building later. Also learn, and this is very deep and maybe hard to learn from a Magic the Gathering game, but learn to give and to get. I often made decks that were fun for my playgroups, but I made them for other people because, well, they did make for really exciting games. They didn't really feel fun to me all the time. But it can be still a good idea to think about your playgroup. If, for example, you have a bunch of slow, grindy games, perhaps it is good to make an aggressive deck, or a deck that makes other people more aggressive. Those exist too. But always keep making your decks in ways that will be fun to you. If you keep going out with a blast but never really win games like I did with my aggressive decks, then you'll burn out really quickly. Sometimes literally because of your Rakdos decks. So make sure that whether you are looking at your opponents, whether you are looking at your playgroup, whether you are following my tips, you are doing anything that is just fun to you. So let me know if you've learned something and what you've learned, or if I have missed something, of course. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Bye.